All right, it's time for another episode of Baked Fresh with Brian Wilton. It ain't quite bread, but it will fill you up. With another mindless mandibular mastication about what we're going to do today. I come across a video today posted by a man. I watch what he does. He says some cool things. It's a clip from a movie where this guy's got this other guy got this worm of an individual, some mouthy little punk he's got him by the face, talking about what all he's done and where he's been and what he's achieved in life. It's pretty impressive. I got thinking about that. Everybody celebrating the scene in that movie. And I couldn't take it. It occurs to me that as we struggle with these ideas of masculinity, that we struggle with these ideas of being men, we've been so conditioned to live vicariously through what we see on TV and what we hear and the great things people write. When are we going to start touting our own horn? If you don't have something to tout about, it's time to begin doing something. When I was a child, I paid cash for my first car. I sold three head of cattle and a horse. Yeah, that was a long time ago. We had to break that horse, and it was an Appaloosa, and that was the most barn-spoiled animal I ever had. Biting its ear, holding on to its neck, kicking and bucking and farting and just hanging on for dear life. And he would throw me, and I'd get right back up on and try it again. That's where the conditioning begins. That's where the conditioning begins. When you begin to indulge in these things of masculinity, you have to understand in all of the mythologies of the world, there is a separation point. There is a point where a boy becomes a man. And it's such a painful, traumatic experience that there is no going back. There is no going back and crawling back into the boyish ideas that you were raised with. It's a real separation. It's painful. Many men never learn how to do it. We can live vicariously all of our days watching TV, seeing action stars do great things on TV and never daring to try to do it ourselves. I was fortunate enough to have men in my life who were larger than life growing up. My grandfather Wilton grew up on a ranch in West Texas. He was born in 1916. His father was the foreman of that ranch. And when he was old enough to ride a horse, 9 or 10 probably, they would get all of the cattle and they would take them on a cattle drive from West Texas over into New Mexico to the railhead to load them up to send them to Kansas City. And that's how they made their money. Imagine that, not so long ago. Now his father came across Oklahoma on a covered wagon, and he met my great-grandma in Arkansas, and they courted. There was a courtship, and they got married, and they lived together the rest of their lives. My grandfather's brother snuck away to join World War II a little bit young. He served in World War II as a tanker. He served as a combat engineer in Korea. He served as Signal Corps in Vietnam. And when he retired from the Army, he was a 3rd Corps Command Sergeant Major. His son retired from the Army. He worked with CID undercover for the Army. And he retired as a recruiter. All of them big men. They may not necessarily have been nice men. They might not have been pleasant men. You might not want to shake their hand. I know Grandpa was prone to fighting at the drop of the hat. And a lot of the times he'd drop the hat. My other grandpa was a boxer in Panama during World War II, protecting the canal. He took up boxing, beat the post champion, came back, earned a reputation in the bars as the toughest man in West Tulsa. And when he turned to 90, he put on a parachute and he jumped out of a plane for his 90th birthday. And when it come time for him to die, and the hospice lady was saying, Carl, would you like to talk to a minister? Grandpa said yes, probably to please the women in the room. And then the minister called and said, is everything okay? Should I still come over? And she looked at Carl and she said, Carl, do you still want him to come over? And he said, no. I've lived life as best I can. I'm not going to try to get into heaven on a lie. That, my friends, is balls. You need a wheelbarrow for something like that. That's all there is to it. I was fortunate enough to grow up with those men, and it stuck. I was born with the wanderlust, it seems like. When I joined the infantry, I got to patrol the DMZ, sneaking around, hunting people that were hunting me, watching them sneak over there, sneak over here, driving through. A game of cat and mouse. One wrong step, and you got to go home to avoid an international incident. I can't tell you how badly I wanted to shoot one of those guys. Not once did I think about whether or not they had a mother or a father that loved them, or a wife or a child. Entirely engaged in my own conditioning and thought process. Interesting how those things develop. I served in Alaska in the frozen peaks, summited a 14,000 peak and climbed on the glacier and jumped in a crevasse. And I've served in the jungles of Thailand and been up by the bridge over the River Kwai and seen Buddhist temples like you cannot believe. Carved into the mountains with ancient monks sitting in there, preserved in the jungle. Open casket. It's not rotted or decayed. It's perfectly preserved. An amazing effect. I've been to the beaches in Guam and seen the Pacific Ocean and stood on the runway the Enola Gay took off from on the island of Tinian. I drove from Fairbanks, Alaska to Lubbock, Texas because my youngest son at the time was by himself and he needed his daddy. I got out and I built a company and I made a fortune. Earning mid six figures every year. Comfortable in what I was doing, successful. Celebrated as a member of the community. And I've thrown all of that away. I've been lost on the North Slope hunting caribou in a whiteout where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and I survived. We all need to start celebrating those great things that we do. We need to walk around with our head held high and our chest stuck out. And whether or not we have a pocket full of money might not be relevant for that day. But what we do need to start doing is resting on a series of our own accomplishments of people that got out there and gave it hell. Oh, I'm going to go do this for a little while. Well, why do you want to do that? Nobody else is going to do that. If you have somebody like that in your crowd, fucking get rid of them. Because all they're going to do is hold you down. Find those people around you that say, well, why not? Why don't you go do that? That sounds like a good idea. Who knows if it'll work or not? You want to know when it'll work? When you're willing to get in there and get dirty up to your armpits in grease and mud and sweat and everything else and find a way to make it happen. And work tirelessly towards your goals. And at the end of this little scene, he says something real important. He says, I've only ever loved one woman with a passion to flee like you couldn't understand. When I see people talk about the masculinity movement and their instruction that they offer men, I see sometimes what bleeds through is a real desire to avoid the emotional pain that comes with it. Be brave, men. Be bold in life. Go have that adventure. Go see the world. I've been to almost all of the 50 states and several countries. And I'm 50 and I'm just now beginning to start. And right now, I love one woman with everything I have. Don't hold back because, well, that might hurt, or I don't know, or I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, or what will people think, or what if I lose everything? Maybe I'll sit down and eat some chips and watch TV and I won't have to worry about it right now. When I started writing Lost Two Book of Days in 2012, the family was selling the family farm. I desperately wanted to keep it. A couple of years before that, I had had the money to take care of it. I could have done it. And then through the best thinking I could come up with, I dashed it all to the ground, a bright and promising future, so that I would have to start all over and learn something new. That process is still going on. These thoughts, these feelings, these things that rise up unbidden and sometimes unwelcome to my mind, I got to take a look at them. Is this something that I should sacrifice so I can become something more? Because I never want to find myself in a situation where my family can't rely on me again. Sometimes it's worth it to take that gamble. Sometimes it's worth it to risk it all to go and see and do. We're so conditioned by what we see on TV and what we hear and the patterns, and everybody has an explanation, and you got to do this and you got to do that, and then I'll consider you alpha or a beta or whatever. Fuck all that shit. You know what goes on in your own heart. You know that you have what it takes to handle everything that happens within it. If it's causing you too much pain or shorting you or holding you back, get rid of it. But don't ever be afraid to be that man that's proud of his accomplishments, even if it's just a good day's work. I used to give a safety brief when I was leading a project. I was a senior night foreman for a big project, a multi-million-dollar project for a Fortune 100 energy company. 6 weeks, 16 weeks of 7/12s. We worked our asses off. It's one thing to lead a man through the dirt and the mud to serve his country. It's one thing to motivate him for a higher ideal that he might work towards and sacrifice himself for. It's entirely another thing to be able to reach out to a man and motivate him to do his best during the day and believe in himself. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Put in that good day's work and believe in yourself. We can't afford to be letting other people enjoy the greatness that we so want. Now is the time. And when you punch out at the end of the day, you'll walk out of that front gate with your head held high, your chest stuck out because you've done the work of a man for the day. And hopefully you have a pocket full of money to show for it. It's the same thing with regards to our spirituality. It's the same thing with regards to the way we love. It's the same thing with regards to the way we build ourselves, our strength, our bodies. Don't hold back. Go a little bit further. Make a little bit of a sacrifice. Be brave enough to embrace that broad challenge of life that's been laid at our feet and the perfect vehicle we've been given to travel the surface of this world, to love somebody else, to be friend to another person. But most importantly, to live a life that when you lay down at night, say, I have done some great things. I have seen some wonderful things. I wonder what comes next. I wonder what's going to happen now. Embrace that unknown. Because at the end of life, we never know when that happens. We have some hints. We have some suggestions. But my grandfather showed me when it's time to embrace that unknown. Embrace it the same way you embrace the life you were given, with everything you've got. So ask yourself, are you living that life with everything you've got? It might simply be loving children. It might simply be raising sons that understand what it means to love a woman. It might mean raising daughters to learn what to expect from the love of a man. Because you know then that they believe in themselves. And that's our responsibility to our children, to teach them how to believe in themselves. Set the example of greatness. Be the legend. Because someday you're going to be the grandpa or the grandma or the great-grandpa or the great-grandma. Be the legend all of your descendants can look up to. Don't try to live vicariously with all of your ancestors from the past. Become your own legend in life.